Springfield, Missouri. Here, a bewildering crime unfolded that challenged our understanding of motherhood. Gypsy Rose Blanchard, a young woman entangled in a web of medical fraud, psychological abuse, and ultimately a murder that sent shockwaves across the world. Was Gypsy a manipulated victim or a cunning perpetrator? Born to Claudine D. Blanchard, Gypsy's life was a carousel of hospitals, surgeries, and medications for ailments she never had. Her mother's overbearing love masked a sinister form of abuse known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy, where a caregiver induces or fabricates illness in their charge for attention and sympathy. Born on May 3, 1967 in Louisiana, Dee was a manipulative liar and was stealing things. She was sexually abused by her own father Claude in a shed, his workshop, from a very young age. He also forced her to take baths with him throughout her childhood. Dee could have been a victim of Munchausen syndrome by proxy herself. Her mother, Emma, said she had a heart murmur, and later that she had other illnesses. Dee was isolated and protected. She wasn't allowed to play outside with the other children or do any chores. She was treated like a baby and had a lot of attention. She was forced to sleep in the same bed as her mom. Dee was a favorite child. She could get whatever she wanted. Her mom bought her every toy she asked for, and she grew to love this attention. She learned this behavior from her mother, but when she became a mother herself, it radically escalated. When Dee was 23, she had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old boy called Rod Blanchard. She told him she was 21. She soon got pregnant. Rod's family was pretty religious and conservative, so he married Dee and Gypsy was born. However, when he turned 18, he realized it was a big mistake because he didn't love Dee. They got a divorce. Dee returned to live with her parents. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was born on July 27, 1991, in Golden Meadow, Louisiana. Her early years seemed unremarkable until Dee began asserting that her daughter had a range of health issues. When Gypsy was about 3 months old, she stopped breathing in her sleep for a moment, and Dee took her to an emergency room. The doctor said that there was nothing wrong with the baby, but Dee decided that Gypsy had sleep apnea. She even bought a breathing machine for her. The only one legitimate condition Gypsy really had was strabismus, when eyes look in different directions from each other. If not fixed, it could lead to blindness. People were really worried about Gypsy and were giving her and Dee love and attention. Gypsy's surgery went well. The problem was solved, and the attention went away. This situation was most probably a trigger for Dee's Munchausen by proxy. And as any person with this diagnosis, Dee would go to different doctors to find the one who will give them medication. Then, she said Gypsy had leukemia, and she started shaving her daughter's head to make people think that she was going through chemotherapy. Then she found that Gypsy had asthma, epilepsy, and muscular dystrophy. One day, 6-year-old Gypsy got into a motorbike accident with her granddad. The accident wasn't serious. Gypsy's leg got scraped and was put in a brace, but it was an excuse for Dee to put her daughter into a wheelchair. She told Gypsy she had to use a wheelchair until her leg heals, but she never let Gypsy leave her wheelchair in spite of the fact that Gypsy could actually walk. Gypsy always craved her mother's attention and was afraid of losing it. And of course, she trusted her, and people around did as well, first of all because Dee was a medical professional. Her background as a nurse's aide provided her with just enough medical knowledge to be convincing. She was familiar with terminology and the symptoms of every illness and could describe them accurately. She manipulated doctors into performing multiple unnecessary surgeries on Gypsy. The cocktail of medications prescribed to Gypsy, based on false diagnoses, was a form of chemical restraint, further subjugating her to Dee's control. One day, Gypsy got out of her wheelchair to bounce on the trampoline at a family party. Dee became furious. Gypsy was so scared of her mother that she never got from her wheelchair again. Gypsy's education was cut short at around the 2nd grade. Dee claimed her illnesses were too severe for school and said school was unable to administer medications. She promised to homeschool Gypsy, but she never did. She isolated Gypsy to gain control that extended to nearly every aspect of her life. She isolated Gypsy from peers and family, and from her dad Rod, who still wanted to visit his daughter. Dee told Gypsy that her dad didn't love her and that he had abused her when she was little. When Gypsy was 9, Dee's mother Emma suddenly passed away. Her dad Claude remarried and Dee moved out of her parents' house. In 2001, Dee got into a serious car accident and stayed in hospital for 2 months. Gypsy had to stay with her grandfather, Claude, who sexually abused her every day in his workshop. Although later Claude denied it and said that Gypsy tried to touch him inappropriately and he said no, Gypsy never told about it to her mother. When Dee Dee got out of hospital, it was her turn to use a wheelchair. And now Claude sexually abused her as well. Dee Dee, still angry with her stepmother for replacing her mom, cooked food with poison for her every night. She died years later, supposedly because of Dee Dee's poisoning. Dee Dee and Gypsy moved to the city of Slidell, Louisiana. Gypsy turned 14. Her illnesses were piling up. Now Dee Dee took away Gypsy's ability to take food to gain even more control. Doctors, persuaded by Dee Dee, performed a surgery and inserted a feeding tube into Gypsy's stomach. Dee Dee gave her liquid foods and administered medication whenever she needed. The physical toll of these unnecessary medical interventions was immense, but the psychological impact was catastrophic. Gypsy's perception of her own health and identity was warped by her mother's lies. Trapped in a body that was medically battered, she grew up believing she was gravely ill, a belief that took years to challenge. Dee Dee stopped working and qualified for Social Security and disability payments. Now she said Gypsy had seizures, problems with her eyes and ears. Gypsy had to wear glasses which she didn't need. She also said that her daughter had cerebral palsy. The medical tests, however, were negative, proving that Gypsy didn't really have it. Then Dee Dee inserted a numbing gel into Gypsy's mouth, which caused excessive drooling, a symptom of cerebral palsy. And doctors decided to remove Gypsy's salivary glands. The side effect of salivary glands removal is tooth loss. So after the operation, Gypsy's teeth started to fall out, and she only had 16 teeth left. While feigning care and concern publicly, Dee Dee seemed to show a lack of genuine empathy for Gypsy's suffering. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina destroyed their home, so Dee Dee and Gypsy had to move into a shelter for a month and a half. When news reporters came to the area, Dee Dee and Gypsy were in front of the cameras, and Gypsy Rose became very popular. Dee Dee fabricated her age to make her daughter seem younger and more dependent. Gypsy was wearing princess dresses. She was coached to act in a childish way and speak in a high-pitched voice. Dee Dee also said her daughter had a very short life expectancy. Charities paid for their trips to Disneyland and their accommodation. One charity built them a home for free, and they moved to Springfield, Missouri. Dee Dee said that she had lost all of Gypsy's medical records because of Hurricane Katrina, and again, doctors believed her. Gypsy, however, felt well, and eventually some doctors started to become suspicious, and they didn't understand why Gypsy was in a wheelchair. Tests came back normal, and there was no evidence of leukemia or muscular dystrophy, and it was suspicious that Dee Dee didn't remember any specifics of Gypsy's treatment of cancer. After a nurse found 3 different birth certificates of Gypsy with different birth dates, the doctor called the Missouri Department of Family Services. He was concerned that the child had been kidnapped. Gypsy, coached by her mother, told them that everything was fine, so the case was closed. Gypsy became addicted to painkillers, and she started sneaking them, gradually increasing her dose. For her, it was an escape from reality. Dee Dee went to great lengths to maintain her charade. However, as Gypsy grew older, the cracks in her perfect narrative began to show. When talking to an 18-year-old girl, their neighbor, Gypsy Rose, started to become rebellious because she saw how normal teenagers lived. They went to school, went shopping, hung out with friends, had boyfriends, and used the internet. One night when Dee Dee was sleeping, Gypsy got out of the bed she shared with her mother, got online, and made a secret Facebook profile where she could talk to her neighbor online. But one night, Dee Dee caught her and got furious. She told Gypsy that she could never use the laptop again. The psychological cage in which Gypsy was trapped was becoming increasingly constrictive and unbearable. In 2011, Gypsy was 19, but people thought she was 15. Once she and her mother went to a sci-fi convention where Gypsy met a 36-year-old man called Dan. He found her secret Facebook account, and over the next few months, they talked on Facebook every night. Gypsy opened up to him about her life. She also found her real birth certificate and realized she was actually 19. Dan told her that she was an adult and was free to go. So, one night at 2 a.m., Gypsy packed a bag, took some money, and walked out of her home. She hitchhiked to Dan's home. It turned out that Dan was on parole, and Gypsy didn't even know what parole meant. He didn't have a place of his own. He didn't have a car. He was staying at a friend's house. And he couldn't leave the state. When Dee Dee woke up, The cell phone had fallen out of Gypsy's bag, so she could see the messages. She came to Dan's home and said that if Gypsy came back with her, she would let her see him. Gypsy believed her and went back. She also told Gypsy that she was 15. Gypsy wanted to trust her because she still loved her. After this incident, the physical abuse began. Dee Dee kept a knife by the bed and threatened to punch Gypsy if she tried to run away again. She chained Gypsy to the bed using handcuffs and a dog leash for 2 weeks. As a punishment, she didn't feed her every day, and she also beat Gypsy. When she finally uncuffed her, Dee Dee told her that she was a witch, and she was going to cast a spell on her to make sure that Gypsy never found love again. After her ritual, Gypsy genuinely believed that. With her clandestine exploration of the internet, Gypsy's understanding of the world and her mother's deceptions deepened. She began to question her conditions, but Dee Dee always had an excuse or a lie to cover the truth. Gypsy's attempts to reach out to the world outside her controlled environment were met with harsh punishments, yet her spirit remained unbroken. A few months later, Gypsy packed a bag intending to run again and hid it under the couch, but Dee Dee found the bag. They had an argument, and Gypsy grabbed Dee Dee's gun, pointed it at her mother, and shot her as many times as she could. Gypsy thought it was a real gun, but it wasn't. It was a BB gun, so she only caused minor injuries to her mother. For a year, Gypsy was trying to gain her mother's trust back, and finally, Dee Dee let Gypsy use the internet again under her supervision. But Gypsy started to go online at night. Amidst the oppressive environment, Gypsy found a sliver of freedom in the digital world. It was here, on a Christian dating website, that she met Nicholas Godejohn. He was 23, 2 years older than Gypsy. Nick lived 8 hours away in Wisconsin. They hit it off immediately. One of Nick's ex-girlfriends messaged Gypsy and told her he was violent, abusive, controlling, but Gypsy didn't believe her. Nick had autism spectrum disorder. They had a lot in common as both of them were pretty isolated. She told Nick that she suspected her mother was lying about all of her illnesses and that she was also physically abusive. Their online interactions quickly evolved into a secret world filled with fantasies and plans for a future together. Gypsy saw in him a chance to experience love and normalcy. Later, Nick revealed that he had multiple personalities and that he had a good side, an evil side, and a dark sexual side. He told Gypsy that he was into S&M. After 2 years, they decided to meet in person. One day in March of 2015, Dee Dee and Gypsy went to the movies to see Cinderella. And Nick, dressed as Prince Charming, came to this cinema to see Gypsy. Their plan was to act out an accidental meeting. At one point, Nick went to the bathroom in the cinema, and Gypsy followed on her own. She had planned to make Nick her first man, but he couldn't perform. Gypsy said she felt it was weird, shameful, and disgusting. After the movie, Gypsy and Nick pretended to bump accidentally into one another and started talking. However, Dee Dee didn't like Nick at all. She said he was a creep because he was a grown man who went to a Disney film on his own. She told Gypsy to never have any contact with Nick again. Gypsy started to rebel, and Dee Dee administered more and more medication. She also told people that Gypsy was mentally challenged. Gypsy felt trapped and hopeless and desperate to get out. Gypsy told everything to Nick, who promised to protect her. Nick told her that his evil personality would take care of her mother. His alternate personality was a 500-year-old vampire called Victor, who loved to kill and could help Gypsy. Gypsy was torn, but she didn't see any other way to escape. She truly thought that she was going to die in that home with her mother. So she turned to Nick's evil personality for help and sent him a message, "Would you kill my mother for me?" Nick agreed, and they started to plan the murder. Gypsy was 23 now, and Nick was 25. Nick told Gypsy to research methods of killing, and they decided that the best way was to kill Dee Dee with a knife. So under Nick's instructions, Gypsy stole a knife from Walmart. Nick said that he wanted to sexually assault the body of Gypsy's mother after murder with Gypsy by his side, and that if they would have a daughter, on her 13th birthday, his alter ego Victor would become her first man. Gypsy dumped him after this conversation. After a few days, he sent her a message that he didn't mean it. Gypsy thought that Nick was her Prince Charming, so she took him back. She thought he loved her, and he was her way out. Gypsy sent Nick a video with a layout of their home. In the video, she made stabbing motions pointing to her mother's bed. On June 9, 2015, Nick took a bus to Missouri and checked into a hotel, waiting for a message from Gypsy. Gypsy and her mom were watching a movie. Nick had said to her that she should tell her mother that she loves her. Gypsy gave Dee Dee a big hug, and her mother said, "What's up? I'm not dead yet." Later, Gypsy cried in the bedroom and hugged her mother's pillow. After receiving Gypsy's message that her mother was asleep, Nick took a cab and arrived at their home wearing a pair of gloves. He told Gypsy to go to the bathroom and shut the door. Gypsy shut the door and covered her ears. Nick crept into Dee Dee's bedroom and got on the bed. At that moment, Dee Dee woke up, saw him, and screamed. Nick stabbed Dee Dee repeatedly 17 times. Dee Dee called her daughter's name and screamed, "Gypsy, help me." Then there was one sharp scream, and after that, there was silence. Nick came to the bathroom, holding a knife. He told Gypsy to take off her clothes. Because she hadn't let him sexually assault her mother, she had to agree to be sexually assaulted by him. Gypsy yelled, "Stop," but he didn't. Gypsy also called her mother for help. After that, they took cash from the house, called a taxi, and went to a hotel. Gypsy was wearing a wig. They were caught on camera giggling and laughing. They stayed in the hotel for a couple of days. Gypsy was very high on painkillers, but she enjoyed being with Nick. This act marked the end of years of abuse, but also the beginning of a new tragedy. Gypsy and Nick fled to his mother's home in Wisconsin, believing they had successfully escaped. They had mailed the murder weapon back to Nick's home, as well as all of their cash, approximately $5,000. However, at Nick's home, the fairy tale came to an end. Gypsy saw that Nick wasn't the independent man she thought she was going to be living with. His small room looked like a 15-year-old boy's room. Nick became incredibly controlling. He told Gypsy what to wear, what to eat, what to watch on TV. Gypsy thought, is this really what I traded? That life for this life? It turned out she was in the arms of another abuser again. Gypsy started to feel guilty. She wanted her mother to be found. So she logged into her mother's Facebook account and made a post on Facebook. Those were Nick's words when he first appeared in her house. However, people just thought their account had been hacked. So she sent another post. After that, people called the police. They found Dee Dee's body, but also saw Gypsy's wheelchair and thought that she had been kidnapped. At that time, Gypsy's neighbor told the police about Gypsy's boyfriend, Nick. The police soon found all their conversations on Facebook. They tracked the IP address of the Facebook account and surrounded Nick's home. After 20 minutes, Gypsy left the home. The community was shocked seeing Gypsy Rose Blanchard walk. Both of them were arrested. Things started to unravel. The police found multiple birth certificates with different dates of birth. They found out that Gypsy never had cancer and that she didn't have any of the illnesses. At first, Gypsy tried to act innocent. Nick, on the contrary, confessed to everything at once. Gypsy accepted a plea bargain and was sentenced to 10 years in prison for second-degree murder. Nick was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Dee Dee's family flushed her ashes down the toilet. Gypsy said that the first day she went to prison was the best day of her life because she finally felt free. She rebuilt her relationship with her dad and her stepmother, Christy. She got her education in prison. She also had some relationships. In 2019, Gypsy got engaged, but he left her and it broke her heart. Then she started dating Ryan, who was her friend at the time. In 2022, in prison she got married to Ryan Anderson, teacher from southern Louisiana. He's now 37. Gypsy says Ryan is funny, has more of a softer side, and calms a storm inside her soul. In prison, she coped using drugs. She hated herself and what she became. So she decided to tell her stepmother, Christy. Now she's clean, sober, and she isn't that person anymore. She's learning not to repeat her mother's pattern. She's learning to tell the truth. Gypsy is the first Munchausen by proxy victim who killed their abuser. About that period of life, she says that, to some degree, she knew it was a facade. However, she didn't know the malicious intent behind the facade. Looking back, Gypsy thinks Nick is a very disturbed person that lives in his own created fantasy world. She expresses remorse for her actions. She says, there are so many moments in time she wishes she could go back to. She wishes she could have stopped her mother's death. The punishment is having that guilt, realizing that she can't undo what she has done. She has it in her heart to deal with every single day. During her parole hearing, she said, "It's not a 10-year sentence. I have to live with it for the rest of my life." In December 28, 2023, she was released from prison. Ryan picked her. She is finally starting to understand who she is and what's happened to her. She wants to live a simple life that everybody else takes for granted. She wants to be fully independent, having her own place, car, earning her own money. She says, today she is responsible for herself. She wants to show that she has every capability of standing on her own 2 feet, and she is not broken. She is stronger than that. She is a survivor. Gypsy has expressed a desire to use her experiences to advocate for abuse victims and raise awareness about the complexities of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. I want to make sure that people in abusive relationships do not resort to murder, Gypsy said. It may seem like every avenue is closed off, but there is always another way. Do anything, but don't take this course of action. Do you believe Gypsy is a victim or a perpetrator? Tell me in the comments.